She crossed the border thinking she would be a nanny, but ended up locked in a house, without pay, without documents, and afraid to ask for help. When she threw a note written with eyeliner to her neighbor, she knew it would be the end, or the beginning of freedom. What happened next, no one in the neighborhood would ever forget. Carla was 19 years old and lived in a small, forgotten village on the outskirts of San Pedro Sula, Honduras. Her house, made of old cement blocks with a rusty tin roof, barely withstood the rains that spared no one. She shared a narrow bed with her younger sister, and every morning she woke up to the sound of roosters and an empty stomach. Since her father died, her mother sold empanadas at the bus terminal, hoping that someday luck would smile on them. If you like interesting stories, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our content. And tell us in the comments where you're watching this video from. We'd love to read from you. One day, luck came knocking at her door, or at least that's what it seemed like. It was a sweltering Tuesday when a man everyone knew as Raina's cousin, someone who showed up every once in a while with stories from the United States, arrived with a different kind of smile. He brought a white envelope, sealed, with computer-printed letters. It wasn't common to see those kinds of things around there. He spoke with Carla's mother, then with her. He used big words that sounded almost magical: babysitter, green card in process, guaranteed housing, weekly salary, all legal. He said that an American family was looking for someone young and trustworthy to take care of their children in Florida, that they had no one else, that Carla was perfect. The mother hesitated. But the man kept talking confidently, showing papers, photos of a big house, and even a passport with his own visa stamped in it. "I'll accompany her myself. She won't be going alone, and in less than a year she can send for you," he assured. Carla, who had never even left her home district, felt that finally she had a way out, a reason to smile. That night, her mother gave her a blue notebook. It wasn't new, but it was clean. On the back cover, she wrote with a black pen, "Don't forget who you are, no matter where you go." Carla hugged it as if it were a charm. Barely 3 days passed between the decision and the goodbye. Everything happened fast, too fast. Carla got a passport, with help from Raina's cousin's contact, who also processed a tourist visa to make the process easier. Nobody asked many questions. They just signed where they were told. The day she left, her mother accompanied her to Tegucigalpa. At the station, they hugged for a long time. The mother didn't cry. She just told her, "Don't let anyone walk all over you. You're not less than anyone, my daughter. Understood?" Carla nodded with moist eyes, put the blue notebook in her backpack, and got on the bus that would take her to the capital and then to the plane. The journey was long, a lot of silence, avoided glances. The man who accompanied her hardly spoke, only responded with monosyllables. At the airport, Carla wanted to ask questions. What if they detain me? What if I don't speak English well? He only said, "Tell them you're coming on vacation. Nothing else, and don't get nervous." When she sat on the plane heading to Miami, for the first time in her life, she felt like she had the world at her feet. She looked out the window as if she could see the future approaching. She pressed the blue notebook against her chest, as if it could protect her from everything unknown. But what she didn't know was that this flight wasn't toward freedom, but toward a prison without bars. There was no turning back. The promise of a decent salary, a respectable job, and the opportunity to help her family was too strong to suspect anything. There were no clear signs, no words of warning, just the illusion of a better life that came packaged in a white envelope with polished words and a smile that knew how to lie. When she landed, it was already night. Miami's humid heat welcomed her with a slap of reality. At the airport, they went through immigration without problems. Nobody asked questions. Nobody noticed anything strange. Outside, a woman in a dark car with tinted windows was waiting for them. She didn't even get out to say hello. Raina's cousin only said, "She'll take you where you'll be living. You're in good hands." And without another word, he walked away into the crowd. Carla remained silent, hugging her backpack. She got in the car without saying a word. The air conditioning froze her arms, but she didn't ask them to turn it down. She didn't ask where they were going either. The woman drove without looking at her. She had her cell phone stuck to her ear, speaking fast English. Carla only understood a few words. House, children, money. Then silence. She looked out the window. Lights, signs in English, wide avenues. Everything was new, bright, foreign. And then the first dark thought crossed her mind. Small, almost imperceptible, but clear. What if all this isn't what it seems? That thought, that spark, would be the first alarm that Carla would ignore. But the blue notebook was there, inside the backpack, like a silent witness, like a promise that, if things went wrong, her story wouldn't be forgotten. And yes, Carla's story was just beginning, but it wouldn't be a story of work and fulfilled dreams. It would be a story of confinement, fear, and resistance, and in the end, of fire. From the moment Carla set foot on American soil, something inside her felt out of place. It wasn't exactly fear. It was more like pressure in her chest, a discomfort she couldn't name. Even though no one had told her to lie, she was clearly instructed. Say you're on vacation, nothing else, smile, don't ask questions. It was a script that didn't accept mistakes. During the flight from Tegucigalpa to Miami, Carla didn't eat. She held the blue notebook against her chest as if it were invisible armor. She had put it inside a plastic bag so it wouldn't get damaged. On the cover, in her mother's handwriting, the phrase that hammered in her head, "Don't forget who you are." Next to her, Raina's cousin's seat was empty. He didn't travel with her. At the airport, a lady who barely looked at her picked her up. She was American, but spoke Spanish with an accent. She introduced herself with a name Carla wouldn't remember later. She put her in the back seat, without asking if she wanted water, if she was hungry, if she was tired. She just turned up the air conditioning and started driving. The trip lasted more than 2 hours. As they moved away from downtown Miami, Carla noticed the houses became less colorful, the trees denser, and the signal on her phone disappeared. Nobody had told her exactly where she was going. When she tried to ask, the woman responded without looking at her, "Everything's arranged. You're going to live with a good family. Just do what you're asked." Silence. It was almost 10 o'clock at night when the car stopped in front of a 2-story house, surrounded by a white fence and a garden without flowers. It looked normal, like so many other American houses Carla had seen in movies. But something about that closed door, the dim porch light, made her skin crawl. The woman got out, opened the back door, and gestured for her to take her things. Carla obeyed. Once inside the house, they asked her to leave her passport and documents for security. They told her they would keep them safe, that she had nothing to worry about. She hesitated, but said nothing. A woman with a rigid face, her hair pulled back in a perfect bun, was the one who received her. She wore a white apron and reading glasses hanging from her neck. Her voice sounded kind, but her eyes were cold. "You'll be fine here," she said, patting her shoulder. "This is your new home." Carla smiled timidly, without knowing she wouldn't see the street again for weeks, or have access to a phone, or receive a single dollar for her work. That first night they took her to a small room without windows. It had a single bed with a thin mattress, a worn blanket, and a table lamp that barely lit up. There was no lock on the inside, only on the outside. She didn't have dinner. The next morning, they woke her at 5 with a knock on the door. "Get up, the kids have school." That was the beginning of the cycle. Carla had to get up early, prepare breakfast, dress the 3 children, make beds, wash clothes, clean bathrooms, cook lunch, and start all over again in the afternoon. She had no rest, no schedule, not even a thank you. When she asked about her salary, the woman looked at her with contempt. "Salary? You're here illegally. We're doing you a favor." The words hit her like a brick, but she didn't respond. Fear settled in her chest like a silent guest. She couldn't go out. She didn't know the area. She didn't speak English. She had no documents. She didn't even know for sure what city she was in. The days passed the same. The nights were long, but she didn't rest. She stayed up writing in her blue notebook, in silence, with the table lamp on, just enough to see the page. Today, I didn't cry in front of them either. My mom has no idea about this. I don't know if they're looking for me. Sometimes she thought about escaping, opening the door and running. But where? And if they found her? And if they deported her without being able to explain anything? She was 19 years old, but she felt 80. Every time she looked out the kitchen window, she saw a high fence, a dirt road, and a neighborhood that seemed to ignore that someone could be screaming inside without opening her mouth. One day she dared to ask if she could call her mom. "What for?" the woman responded. "She's better off thinking you're fine." And she slammed the door in her face. Weeks passed. She didn't know how many. Carla lost track of time. Everything was reduced to mechanical routines. Clean, care, obey, be quiet. Once she heard the couple arguing in English. She didn't understand everything but caught key words: illegal, risk, ICE, report. She felt her stomach empty. She knew then that she wasn't a worker. She was a secret, a dirty secret that could be discarded at any moment. That night, she wrote with more force than ever in the notebook, "If something happens to me, let someone find this." Every word was a contained scream. Freedom, which she had dreamed of so much, became a cell without bars. And the worst wasn't the lack of hot food or the endless work. The worst was the feeling of being invisible. That nobody, absolutely nobody, knew she existed in there. But something inside her didn't break, not yet. Something kept her standing. Maybe that phrase on the back cover, maybe her mother's voice in her head, maybe the hope that, despite everything, didn't die. And very soon, Carla would do something that would change everything. The morning Carla tried to open the front door by herself, she discovered a truth she already intuited. She couldn't leave. Not just because she didn't know the neighborhood or because she didn't speak the language. Literally, the door was locked from the outside. It had a high latch that could only be opened with a special key, and that key wasn't in her hands. The first time she turned the handle cautiously and felt the obstacle on the other side, she stood still for several seconds, as if the world had stopped. She felt the air become thick, as if someone was squeezing her throat. She slowly closed it again, trembling, and pretended she had only come for the broom. The house was in a rural area in the interior of Florida, far from any recognizable city. There were no nearby stores, no public transportation, just a few houses scattered among wide terrains, thick vegetation, and a highway that couldn't be seen from the windows. The married couple who had received her lived there with their 3 children, 2 girls aged 8 and 6, and a boy barely 3. The routine was an endless loop. From 5 in the morning until the lights went out, Carla was nanny, cook, laundress, gardener, and at night, she wrote, because if anything kept her sane, it was the blue notebook. That notebook was her refuge, her therapist, her only voice. She wrote hidden in the bathroom, while the children slept or in the few minutes she had before falling exhausted. She never left it in sight. She kept it in an old pillowcase under the mattress. Every line was a confession without a recipient. Today they yelled at me for not getting a stain out properly. The boy bit me. I couldn't cry. They locked me up all weekend because I asked about my papers. I don't exist. One day, while ironing clothes in the laundry room, she heard the woman saying on the phone, "Yes, she's still here. No, she hasn't complained. She can't. Who would she tell anything to?" Then she laughed, as if talking about a piece of furniture. As if Carla weren't a person. It was the first time Carla felt real anger, not fear, not sadness, anger. That night in the notebook she wrote forcefully, If I were your daughter, would you treat me the same? But that anger didn't last long, because fear returned stronger when she tried to complain. Can you tell me when I'm going to receive my first paycheck? The woman didn't even bother looking at her. You think you're in a position to demand anything? You don't have papers, girl. You're illegal. Do you want me to call immigration? Is that what you want? Carla lowered her head. Her body tensed as if she had received a slap. She said nothing, just went back to work, with the woman's words repeating in her mind like a cruel echo. You're illegal. You're illegal. You're illegal. That was the breaking point. The weeks passed without references from the outside world. The television was blocked with parental controls. They could only watch children's channels or news in English. Sometimes, Carla heard in the background politicians' speeches talking about borders, deportations, illegals, as if they were a virus. Every time someone said ICE or Border Patrol, her heart would jump. She no longer recognized herself in the mirror. She had lost weight, had deep, dark circles, and hands full of small wounds from constant work. Always dirty nails, sore wrists, and a hole in her stomach that wasn't just from hunger. It was anguish. One afternoon, while sweeping the backyard, she encountered something that seemed impossible: a gaze. On the other side of the fence, an older man with brown skin, a worn hat, and a checkered shirt was watering his garden. Their eyes met. Carla barely raised her gaze. He nodded courteously. He didn't say anything. But that gaze was the most human thing she had felt in months. That night, she wrote in the notebook, "There's someone on the other side." The eye contact with the neighbor became a silent routine. Once a week, he would come out at the same time to water his plants, prune bushes, or simply get some air. Carla, from her invisible cage, watched him without speaking. She never dared to greet him, but in her head, she wove 1,000 possibilities. What if I could tell him something? What if he knew I'm trapped? What if... The blue notebook was already full of written pages. She had torn some out to use as napkins, others for fear they would be found. She kept pieces in her pockets, under the bed, inside children's books. But she couldn't help continuing to write. It was that or go crazy. On a Tuesday afternoon, while the woman was taking a nap and the children were watching television, Carla found a forgotten eyeliner in the bathroom. She had no ink, no pens, just that pencil, dark brown. She had a crazy idea. She tore a page from the notebook, the cleanest one left. She wrote in tight letters, "My name is Carla. I am locked in this house. They don't let me leave. I don't have my documents. They don't pay me. Please, help me." She folded it in 4 parts, put it in her apron pocket and waited. 2 days passed. 3. No opportunity presented itself. Fear was stronger than courage. But on the 4th day, while sweeping the entrance, she saw him again. The man from the garden, alone, looking at the plants. She took a deep breath, held back tears, pretended to dust something off the broom, approached the fence, and let the wind do its thing. The paper flew. It bounced on the grass and fell near his feet. The man noticed it. He bent down discreetly, didn't raise his head, just put the paper in his pocket and continued watering. That night, Carla didn't write anything. She stayed awake until dawn, looking at the ceiling, waiting, thinking either that would be the end or the beginning of her freedom. The days following the throwing of the note were the longest of Carla's life. Fear was a constant current in her veins. Every noise made her jump. Every time someone knocked on the door, her heart paralyzed. She expected a reaction, a scream, a threat, something that would indicate they had discovered her attempt to ask for help. But nothing happened. The routine continued the same, almost mockingly the same shouts for insignificant mistakes. The same cold meals, the same dry orders, the same confinement. But now each day had an extra weight, the terror of the unknown, because she didn't know if the neighbor had read the paper. She didn't know if he had understood. She didn't know if he was on her side, or if he had thrown it in the trash out of fear or indifference. The uncertainty was eating at her. One afternoon, while hanging clothes to dry in the backyard, the little boy tripped over a bucket and scraped his knee. He cried so loud that the woman came running down, furious. The blame, as always, fell on Carla. She dragged her by the arm to the kitchen and, with the door closed, yelled at her like never before. "Are you stupid or what? We leave you in charge of the children, and you can't even keep them from killing themselves." Carla tried to explain, but there was no space for her voice. "And be grateful we have you here, because if it were up to me, you'd be deported already." She spat, with eyes burning with fury. It was the first time she pushed her. Not with enough force to physically hurt her, but enough for Carla to understand something terrifying. She had crossed an invisible line. It was no longer just exploitation, it was total domination. Control through fear, through immigration status, through silence. That night she couldn't write. She just cried, quietly, with her face pressed against the pillow. Her mother's words were still there, on the back cover of the notebook. "Don't forget who you are." But who was she now? The girl from the village, full of dreams, or this mute shadow who could barely lift her gaze? Fear became a chain, not made of iron but of words, of threats, of possibilities, because now, more than ever, Carla felt that any wrong step could cost her freedom, or something worse. When she tried to imagine what would happen if they deported her, her mind filled with blurry images. A cold room, a plane, returning to Honduras empty-handed, with shame, with her mother's gaze, asking without speaking, what happened? Disappointment scared her more than bars, because she had left as her family's hope, the one who was going to send money, the one who would change her family's destiny. To return with nothing after all that time would be like dying without having lived. But something changed. Friday afternoon, while washing dishes, she saw something unusual through the window. A white pickup truck parked in front of the neighbor's house. The same man who had received the note came out of his house, greeted a couple of people, and went inside with them. They carried folders in their hands. One wore a shirt with a badge on his chest, the other, dark sunglasses. Carla held her breath. The truck was there for more than an hour. From her post in the kitchen, she tried to spy without being noticed, but she couldn't see more. When it finally disappeared from view, Carla felt the world collapsing. What if they were from immigration? What if the neighbor had said something wrong? What if they were coming for her? She spent the entire weekend without sleeping. She reacted with a start to any noise. She kept the notebook hidden and walked as if the floor were glass. Fear was no longer a visitor, it was a tenant living in her chest. Monday, however, something unexpected happened. The woman announced that they would all go out together to do shopping. It was the first time Carla was going to get in the car since she arrived. She was asked to help load bags, to control the children. But even in the back seat with the windows up, the feeling of confinement didn't disappear. She looked at the street with prey eyes. She remembered the faces of people outside. No one could know what she was living, because that was the cruelest part. The world kept turning, people smiled, and she remained a prisoner, with clean clothes and a plate of food she served to others. Back at the house, she went straight to her room. She closed the door, looked for the notebook, opened it with trembling hands and wrote, "If they deport me, at least I'll know I tried. But if I stay quiet, I'm already dead." And then, finally, she understood something profound. Fear wasn't just her enemy, it was also her engine, because the fear of continuing like this indefinitely surpassed the fear of being discovered. She still didn't know it, but the decision she had made when throwing that paper would soon have a consequence, one that would shake the entire neighborhood. The living room television was always background noise in the house. It was never really silent. From 7 in the morning until night, some screen was on. Cartoons for the children, police shows the woman watched while cooking, or news in English with presenters with rigid smiles and stern gazes. Carla, while cleaning behind the sofas or mopping the shiny living room floor, caught scattered words. Many she didn't understand, but others she did. Words that froze her blood: deportations, illegals, ICE raids, Trump administration. It was during one of those afternoons, when the woman was ironing in the living room and Carla was washing dishes, that she heard it clearly. A massive raid at a packing plant in Mississippi. More than 150 detained. Some had been in the country for years, all without papers. The images showed handcuffed people, heads down, crying in front of cameras that didn't stop recording. Some were pushed toward armored trucks. Others simply disappeared among uniforms and shouts. Carla dropped a cup. It broke against the sink. "What are you doing?" shouted the woman from the living room. "That china is imported." "Sorry," Carla responded, quickly picking up the pieces. But her mind was far from that kitchen. She imagined herself being dragged from that house by armed men, without time to explain anything, without her notebook, without being able to call her mother. She imagined being deported without even knowing what city she was in. Fear was no longer just emotional. It became physical. Her stomach hurt. She had nausea in the mornings. Sometimes she trembled uncontrollably when she heard a doorbell or the sound of a heavy engine outside. One night, while the children slept, Carla turned on the television in the playroom with no sound, only with subtitles. She looked for Spanish news channels. She found one. They showed figures, new laws, testimonies. A woman spoke through tears. "They separated me from my children. The agents said they couldn't do anything. They put me in a cell like I was a criminal." Carla sat in front of the screen until 2 in the morning. She didn't even notice the passage of time. She bit her lips until they bled. For a moment, she thought about giving up, leaving a message explaining everything, staying still and accepting whatever fate awaited her. But when she looked down and saw her hands, fingertips burned by chlorine, broken nails, cracked skin, something ignited again. She couldn't continue like this. It wasn't a mistake that had brought her to this country. It was a promise sold with a false smile and soft voice, but a promise nonetheless. She wasn't a criminal. She didn't deserve to be treated like one. The next day, upon hearing the woman mention something about a new anti-immigrant plan, Carla did something dangerous. She asked, "That thing they're showing on TV, does it affect us?" The woman stopped cutting vegetables and looked at her with an expression that mixed mockery and warning. "Us? No, dear. It affects you. You're the illegal here. I'm in my house. You already know." And then she smiled, as if she had just won a game. It was then that Carla understood the magnitude of her loneliness. It wasn't just that she had no friends or family. It wasn't just that she couldn't go out. It was that she was in an invisible system that allowed this, that justified it, that hid it under luxury carpets, family dinners, and patriotic speeches. That night, Carla did something she had never done before. She knelt in front of her room window, looked at the night sky and prayed. She didn't know how to pray well. She didn't remember complete prayers, but she said quietly, "God, I'm not asking you to free me. Just let someone see. Let someone see what they're doing to me." The words broke between her teeth. "Let someone see me." Days passed. She kept waiting. She kept doing her chores as if nothing happened. But inside, she was a different person. Her gaze was no longer the same. She no longer asked permission to cry. She no longer apologized for existing until something strange happened. One Wednesday morning, when taking down the garbage bags, she found something unexpected in the side bin of the house. An envelope. It was white, sealed, without a name. Inside, just a note written in Spanish, in an older man's handwriting. "I saw you, stay calm. I'm looking for help." Carla felt her legs couldn't support her. She had to lean against the wall. She went back inside, trembling, with the envelope hidden under her blouse. In the bathroom, she locked herself in and read it over and over, as if it were a sacred passage. Someone had seen her. Someone was on the other side. She wasn't alone. She didn't write anything in the notebook that night. There was no need, because for the first time in months, she slept, not deeply, not without starts, but she slept because that note was something she hadn't felt since crossing the border. Hope. And what came next, no one in that house or in that neighborhood could forget. If you're enjoying this story, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and activate notifications to stay on top of all our content. The day Carla wrote the message that would forever change her life, she did it with sweaty hands and her heart beating like a war drum. She knew she had no pencil, no pen, no marker. She had searched throughout the house, rummaged through drawers, among the children's toys, at the bottom of the dirty laundry basket. Nothing, as if even the right to write had been taken from her. She only found one thing, an eyeliner, the kind the woman used every morning in front of the hallway mirror. It was brown, small, worn. She held it as if it were a gold pen. That night, sitting on the floor of her room, with the blue notebook open on her knees, she tore out one of the last clean pages, the smoothest, the least wrinkled. She had no time to think too much. Every word had to be measured, every line a unique opportunity. She wrote carefully, pressing the stroke so it would show, "My name is Carla. I am locked in this house. I don't have my papers. They don't pay me. They don't let me leave. Please help me." She simply signed it, Carla. She read the message twice, then folded it in 4 parts, put it in her pants pocket, and sat in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the muffled snoring of the husband, the tick-tock of the wall clock. Fear settled in her neck like a living weight. She felt every second was a countdown. The next morning she got up as always, prepared breakfast for the children, collected their plates, and began sweeping the entrance as if it were another normal day. But it wasn't. Her breathing was shallow. Her fingers went numb. The neighbor was in the yard, watering his plants, as he did every week. He didn't look at her, but Carla noticed he was closer to the fence, more attentive. She waited for the woman to go inside with the baby. When she made sure she was alone for a brief moment, she discreetly took the paper from her pocket. Pretending to shake off a leaf from the ground, she approached the gate. She bent down and let it fall. The wind, an accomplice, did the rest. The paper crossed the fence and fell near the man's feet. He looked down, bent down as if picking up a fallen branch, put it in his shirt pocket and continued watering. He didn't look up. He didn't smile. He didn't say anything. Carla returned inside with her heart in her throat. Throughout the day, she waited for something to happen, for the woman to receive a call, for someone to arrive asking about her, for the door to open angrily. But nothing happened, nor the next day, or the next. The days became sharp knives, the nights abysses of anxiety. She slept little, ate less. She was afraid the neighbor hadn't understood, or worse, that he had ignored it. What if he thought it was an exaggeration? What if he didn't believe? What if he was afraid of getting in trouble? But Thursday night, while washing dishes, something shook her. A dry knock on the fence. She went out with a garbage bag, feigning normalcy, and there it was. Another paper, folded, clean, wrapped in a small plastic bag. She grabbed it quickly without anyone noticing and ran to the bathroom with the excuse of brushing her teeth. She opened it with trembling fingers. "I saw you." "Stay calm. I already spoke to someone. You're not alone. Wait, be strong." The world stopped. It wasn't an empty promise. Someone out there had not only heard her, they believed her. That was the real moment when Carla felt she could keep resisting. Because if there was a voice out there, then her confinement was no longer invisible. Friday, she woke up with swollen eyes from crying so much the night before. But not from sadness. She cried from relief, from accumulated rage. from knowing she still had a little power over her story. While preparing breakfast, she felt more alert. She observed better. She listened more. That same day, in the afternoon, the man appeared again. This time with a different hat and with a cell phone in his hand. He pretended to take photos of his plants, but Carla knew it was a signal. That night she wrote in the notebook, "If they take me out of here tomorrow, I'm not leaving without the notebook. This notebook is the only thing I have that proves I existed. My mother said that silence also screams, but I don't want to scream in silence anymore. I want to speak, with voice, with everything." And she closed the notebook delicately, like someone protecting an open wound. She spent the entire weekend waiting for a knock on the door, an unknown car, an alarm announcing the end. Nothing came, but there was no turning back either. Monday at noon, while folding clothes in the boys' room, she heard a dry noise at the front door. Not a doorbell, a firm knock, 3 times. The woman went to open it. Carla heard fragments of conversation, deep voices, a name mentioned, Carla. Then a strange silence, as if all the air in the world stopped for a moment. The woman shouted, "What did you do, damn it?" And Carla knew the time had come. She ran to her room, grabbed the blue notebook and pressed it against her chest. When the door opened, there were no police with guns or handcuffs or dark uniforms. There were 2 people in civilian clothes, a woman with a kind face, a man with a calm voice. "Carla?" they asked in Spanish. Carla couldn't speak. She just nodded. She had the notebook in her hands, and her hands trembling. What happened next would change everyone's life in that house, and the entire neighborhood's. Carla would never forget the sound of those boots stepping on the entrance floor. They weren't military, they weren't ordinary police. They were firm boots, worn from someone accustomed to walking between pain and urgency. They belonged to a county agent, accompanied by a woman with a calm demeanor but attentive eyes. Both spoke Spanish with an accent, but with the clarity of someone trained to listen beyond words. It wasn't a raid. There were no shouts, no struggling, no handcuffs. The operation was surgical, discreet, humane. As if they already knew that the victim wasn't who needed to be detained, but who needed to be freed. The woman shouted, furious, "This girl lies. We help her. She's ungrateful. We treat her like family." The agent didn't respond. He just asked her to calm down. The social worker asked her to leave the room while they talked to Carla. That was enough for Carla, after months, to breathe for the first time without fear. But not even then could she speak. Words got stuck in her throat. She only held the blue notebook with both hands, pressing it against her chest as if it were a life preserver. She was barefoot. Her clothes had bleach stains, and her eyes, those eyes didn't look like those of a 20-year-old. They were from someone who had aged by force. The social worker crouched to be at her level and spoke with a firm but sweet voice. "Carla, you're not alone anymore. No one else is going to hurt you. Can you tell me if you're injured?" Carla shook her head. But she raised her hands, small wounds, dry burn marks, broken nails. "Did they hit you?" She hesitated, then murmured, "Only once." But it was more with words. The agent intervened. "We're going to take you to a safe place. We need you to trust us. What you lived wasn't your fault. You were a victim of human trafficking. It's a crime. You're not guilty of anything." Carla broke down crying. She couldn't contain it. She screamed. She covered her mouth with her hand, as she had learned to do so many nights to not wake the children, but this time there was no need. No one was going to silence her. No one was going to punish her for crying. No one had any rights over her body anymore. They took her out through the back door to avoid confrontations. They didn't need scandals, just protection. The neighbor, that older man who had received the note, watched from his garden. He didn't say anything. He just made a slight gesture with his head when she passed. Carla looked at him with wet cheeks. She knew there wouldn't be enough words in the world to thank him, but her gaze said everything. In the social services van, Carla hugged her blue notebook. The agent offered her water. The social worker handed her a thin blanket. "Everything you wrote," she said, pointing to the notebook, "can help us. If you're ready, when you're ready, you could tell it." Carla nodded. She still couldn't articulate long sentences, but one word came out clearly: "Thank you." They arrived at a protection center for victims of human trafficking. It wasn't a jail, it wasn't a grey office. It was a spacious house, quiet, with clean beds, clear walls, and windows without bars. They gave her new clothes, a space to shower, a temporary use cell phone, and most importantly, a door she could open by herself. When she was finally alone in the room, Carla looked at herself in the mirror. It was hard to recognize herself: disheveled hair, paler skin, sunken eyes, but she was alive. She was safe. She sat on the bed, opened the notebook, and for the first time in weeks, wrote without fear. "I'm out." I breathed real air. The door opens from the inside and the outside. She couldn't sleep that first night. The bed was too soft, the silence too strange. Every floor creak reminded her of months of confinement. But there was something different. The certainty that she was no longer under threat, that no one could touch her without her permission, that she owned her body and her voice. The next morning, she received a visit from a lawyer, a young woman of Mexican origin who spoke with the speed of someone who knows the urgency of justice. "You have a legal option," she explained. "It's called a T-visa. It's for victims of human trafficking. It's not automatic. But if you cooperate with authorities and tell your story, we can apply for it." Carla hesitated. Fear still lived in her memory. "What if they deport me?" "They won't," said the lawyer, "but you need courage. No more silence." Courage, a heavy word. But she had already started. She'd already thrown a note written with eyeliner. How could she not continue? That afternoon, in the center's garden, Carla wrote another sentence in her notebook. "I'm not invisible. They just weren't looking." The reconstruction would be slow. There were wounds that couldn't be seen, nightmares that didn't go away upon waking. But it had begun. The miracle didn't come with angels. It came with worn boots, an attentive gardener, and a piece of paper with brown ink. And although the road to freedom was just beginning, it was no longer the same. Because now, Carla had a name, a story, a voice. The days following the rescue weren't easy. Although she was no longer locked up, Carla carried the prison inside. She could walk freely through the help center, open doors whenever she wanted, look out windows without fear. But still, she slept with the blue notebook pressed against her chest, like an invisible shield against what her mind kept repeating every night. The danger is still there. Don't let your guard down. The center was a temporary shelter for victims of human trafficking. It was located on the outskirts of Orlando, surrounded by trees and with a perimeter fence that didn't serve to lock in, but to protect. It wasn't a place with cells or aggressive surveillance. There, calm was breathed. There were women from different countries: Guatemala, El Salvador, Mexico, even 2 young Vietnamese women. Some had small children with them, others were completely alone. They all shared one thing. They had been torn from their lives by lies that promised work and delivered slavery. Carla, during the first days, barely spoke. She walked with short steps, hands in pockets, head down. She showered in hiding, ate little, and wrote in her notebook more than she talked with people. But the center workers didn't pressure her. They knew that every word, every look was a conquest. It was in the second week that she received her first session with the center's psychologist, Mrs. Rosario, a Puerto Rican woman with a soft voice and firm character. They sat under a palm tree in a small backyard garden. Carla didn't speak, she just listened. "No one here will judge you," Rosario told her. "We're not here to tell you what to do, just to help you understand that what happened to you wasn't your fault." Carla didn't respond. Do you know what trauma is? The psychologist continued. It's like a seed you didn't ask to plant, but that starts growing inside you. And if you don't take care of it, if you don't face it, it becomes something that suffocates you. Carla looked at the ground, and then, for the first time, she raised the notebook. She opened it to a page. She showed her a sentence written in tight letters. They told me I was illegal, like I was trash. Rosario read, took a deep breath, and nodded. They say that a lot, but you're not illegal. No one is. What you lived was a crime. And now, we're going to start repairing that. It was the first time Carla felt she wasn't dirty, that she wasn't guilty of existing. After that session, Rosario encouraged her to write a letter to her mother, not to send, just to process. Carla sat in the empty dining room one night with a white sheet they offered her at the center and wrote with a trembling hand, "Mom, I can't tell you everything yet, but I'm still alive. I'm safe. I remember your notebook every day. I didn't forget who I am. I just got lost for a while. But I'm finding myself now." She didn't send it. She kept it inside the blue notebook, between the torn pages, the dirty memories, and the words no one else had read. Meanwhile, the center's lawyer, attorney Mariana, began the T-visa process. She explained clearly, the procedure could take months. They would need evidence, statements, documents. The police were already investigating the family that had held her. Carla's testimony was key. "What if they say I accepted everything?" Carla asked one day. "They can say whatever they want, but they don't have your notebook. They don't have your wounds. They don't have your sleepless nights. You have the truth," Mariana responded firmly. That gave her strength. English classes also began. It was difficult at first. Every new word sounded like a wall. But little by little, with patience, she was learning to introduce herself, to describe her story with basic phrases. "My name is Carla. I am from Honduras. I was a victim." The first time she said those words out loud in front of the group, she trembled, but she didn't cry. One day, a volunteer gave her a pair of new tennis shoes. Carla held them as if they were a trophy. Hers were torn, worn out from so much work without rest. With the new ones, she walked differently, more firmly, more herself. When she received her temporary work permit, she couldn't believe it. Mariana handed her the document with a smile. "It's not definitive, but it's legal. Now you can look for a job. You have options here." Carla chose to work at a Hispanic bakery. She started as a kitchen assistant, washing trays, chopping fruit, wrapping bread. The first day was hard. The sound of orders, the strong smells, the pressure reminded her of confinement. But this time, it was different. If she didn't like something, she could leave. She was there by choice. With her first paycheck, she bought a calling card to Honduras. The call was short. Her mother cried so much she could barely speak. "I'm fine, Mom," Carla said. "I can't tell you everything yet, but I'm free, really free." They cried together, in silence, across the continent. The reconstruction wasn't easy. Carla had anxiety attacks sometimes, especially when she heard shouting or loud bangs. She couldn't watch movies with confinement. She still slept with a light on. But every step, every small achievement, was a victory. One night, while finishing her shift at the bakery, a boy came up with his mother and said, "Do you make the coconut bread? It's my favorite." Carla smiled. She gave him one for free. When she returned to the shelter that night, she wrote in her notebook, "Today they called me by my name. Today I wasn't a shadow. Today I did something that brought joy to someone." And for the first time in a long time, she felt that she wasn't just alive. She was being reborn. A few months after arriving at the shelter, Carla was no longer the same hunched girl who avoided glances. She still had scars, yes, physical, emotional, invisible. But there was a new strength in her walk. It wasn't the strength of someone who had won, but of someone who had decided never to give up again. Each day was a small triumph. Waking up without starts, understanding a conversation in English, looking at her reflection and not feeling dirty. Work at the bakery became her corner of dignity. It was a family business run by a Mexican couple who took her in without asking questions. Don Ernesto, the owner, told her from the first day, "Here we don't ask about the past. Here we build the future. You're part of the team, okay?" She could only nod with moist eyes. The work routine gave her structure, purpose. She got up early, took the bus with her headphones on, listening to podcasts to practice the language. She learned to knead, to handle the oven, to decorate cakes. But more than that, she learned to speak again, to respond when they asked how she was, to say she was tired, happy, annoyed, to name what she felt. And every 2 weeks when her pay arrived, she felt a mixture of surprise and pride. Finally, her work was worth something concrete. It wasn't symbolic coins or empty promises. It was a check with her name, her effort, her time. With her first paycheck, she bought white sneakers, new jeans, and an international calling card to call her mother. The call was short, but unforgettable. Carla was standing in a corner of the shelter, the phone trembling in her fingers. Her mother answered with a trembling voice. "Hello, Mom. It's me, it's Carla. Carla, my daughter. Where are you? I thought..." Her mother's voice broke into 1,000 tears. "I thought you were dead." "I'm not dead, Mom. I'm alive. Free. I can't tell you everything, not yet, but I'll be able to, soon, I promise." They stayed in silence for a few seconds, the kind of silence that unites, that says more than 1,000 words. And then her mother told her something that Carla would later write carefully in her notebook. "It doesn't matter where you are. If you're alive and fighting, then you're home." That night, Carla slept without the light on for the first time. At the shelter, she no longer needed to be accompanied to sessions. She started helping other newly arrived girls. She translated, explained, showed them where the dining room was, how the showers worked, where they could get clean clothes. Rosario, the psychologist, watched her from afar and smiled. She knew Carla had crossed an invisible line, from victim to guide. Attorney Mariana also brought her good news. Her T-visa application was moving forward quickly. Local authorities had confirmed her testimony, and with the neighbor's statement, there was enough evidence to support the case. "If everything goes well," Mariana told her one afternoon, "in less than a year, you could have residency. And after that, who knows? Even citizenship if you decide." Carla laughed softly. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like the future was a dead end. Over time, she managed to move from the shelter to a small shared apartment with 2 other girls from the program. It was modest, with peeling walls and a bathroom that often clogged, but it was hers. She could close the door and know that no one had the key but her. She hung a photo of her mother above the bed, and next to it, on an improvised shelf, she placed the blue notebook open to a new page. On it, she had written, "Today I laughed until my stomach hurt. I really laughed." That's also a victory. At the bakery, they started calling her the boss, between joke and respect, not because she commanded, but because they knew they could count on her. She was punctual, detail-oriented, good with customers. She even began giving ideas to improve sales. One day, she proposed making cornbread with a Honduran recipe. It was a success. Don Ernesto hugged her and said, "Carla, you're already leaving your mark." And she thought, that's what I want. To leave a mark, not a scar. Every step, every achievement came with fear. Sometimes just seeing a white pickup truck on the street would make her heart race. Or a phrase similar to those her captors told her would make her hands tremble. But now she knew what to do. She breathed. She repeated to herself, "I'm safe. I'm not alone." And then, one ordinary day, while baking sweet bread, Don Ernesto said, "Hey, Carla, there's an organization coming tomorrow to talk about labor rights. They're giving a talk. Would you like to tell your story?" Carla looked at him, surprised. It wasn't the first time someone asked her to speak, but it was the first time she felt ready. "Yes," she said without thinking. "Yes, I want to." That night, she wrote one last sentence in her notebook. Maybe what I lived wasn't just to survive it. Maybe it was to tell it. And with that, she closed the notebook. Not like someone closing a chapter, but like someone preparing to open it in front of others. Because Carla was no longer just a survivor. Now, she was a voice. The community room where the talk about labor rights was held wasn't very big. Barely 50 plastic chairs lined up, a table with coffee and sweet bread, made by Carla that same morning, and a small improvised stage with a microphone connected to an old speaker. In the back, a sign said in colorful letters, "No one is illegal. Everyone deserves dignity." Carla was sitting in the third row, hands on her knees. Her blue notebook rested inside her backpack, well protected. She had decided not to read directly from it, although she carried it as a talisman. She didn't need to remember. Her story was engraved in every muscle of her body. The room filled with farm workers, domestic workers, cooks, young migrants, and even some entire families. People who, like her, lived on that thin line between hope and fear. The kind of people who rarely appear in the news, unless it's for a raid or a tragedy. When they called her to speak, her heart pounded hard, but she no longer trembled. She went up to the stage, tucked her hair behind her ear, and held the microphone firmly. For a second, she looked at the faces in front of her. Many didn't know who she was, but they all knew what it was to be afraid. And then she spoke. "My name is Carla. I'm 21 years old. I'm from Honduras. And for a long time, I was missing without being dead." There was a heavy silence. No one breathed. "They brought me to the United States with the promise of a job. They told me I was going to take care of children, that I would have a salary, a place to live. But when I arrived, they took my documents. They locked me in a house. They forced me to work without rest, without pay, without being able to leave. They told me that if I spoke, they would deport me. They called me illegal, as if that justified everything." Murmurs began. Some people lowered their heads, others clenched their fists. "I lived like that for months, locked up, invisible, until one day I gathered courage and wrote a message with eyeliner. I threw it into the neighbor's yard, and that paper saved my life." Carla swallowed. The lump in her throat was there, but it didn't stop her. "Now I'm here, legal, working, learning, speaking, and not because someone rescued me and that's it. I'm here because someone listened to me, because someone believed in me, because I didn't let go of my voice. I hid it in a notebook, but I never turned it off." She opened her backpack. She took out the blue notebook. She showed it. "This notebook has everything I lived. I didn't write it to cry. I wrote it to not disappear. And today, I want to tell you something it took me a long time to understand. We were never invisible. They were just looking in the wrong place." The room exploded in applause. It wasn't a lukewarm applause. It was long, sincere, powerful, an applause of recognition, of gratitude, of shared anger, of solidarity. From that day on, Carla began receiving invitations to tell her story in schools, churches, universities, community centers. At first, she hesitated, but soon she understood that her voice could do more than heal her own past. It could prevent similar futures. The blue notebook, worn with torn pages, grease stains, and phrases written in ink, pencil, and even eyeliner, became a symbol. Sometimes she lent it. Sometimes she let people read it in silence. Every page carried more than memory. It was living proof that the unthinkable happens, and that courage is stronger than fear. Her story inspired other victims to denounce, mothers to talk to their daughters, neighbors to look more carefully. The man who received the note, Don Rogelio, was recognized by human rights organizations for his silent and brave action. He humbly just said, "I didn't do anything special. I just saw what was in front of me and didn't turn a blind eye." Carla never returned to that house where she was locked up. The case against the family that held her continued its legal course. She didn't need revenge, just justice, and she was already achieving it in her way. Her mother, from Honduras, now knew almost the whole truth. They cried a lot over video calls, but they also laughed. The mother kept selling empanadas. Carla, from Florida, sent money when she could. But more than that, she sent voice messages, photos, words. She sent the certainty that she was still standing. One day, Carla asked her, "Mom, do you remember what you wrote in the notebook?" "Of course," she responded. "Don't forget who you are." "Well, I didn't forget. I just took time to find myself again." Now Carla dreams of bringing her mother legally, of studying social work, of opening her own shelter, and maybe someday publishing the pages of her notebook, not to become famous, but so that no other Carla has to write in secret that she's locked up with eyeliner. Because her story wasn't an exception. It was a scream turned into an echo, and that echo will never be silenced again. And if you like this story, you'll surely love the next one that appears on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and activate notifications. Until next time.